Hello, this is Curtis from Geniuscarpros. We have a 2006 Chevy Trailblazer in the shop today with a 4.2 liter engine. Now, this vehicle was at 2 previous shops before we got it. So we gathered a lot of evidence, did some testing, fixed the problem, and we have some things to tell you, how we got to these conclusions and what happened. So first, originally, a dome light was left on in this car, and the battery died. So the vehicle owner replaced his battery and put that battery back in the car, and what happened after that was they were driving the vehicle and they found out that the lights were dimming and the voltage needle on the instrument cluster was surging and the battery light was coming on. So they found out that the car wasn't charging properly, so they took it into the shop. Now, when the vehicle got to the shop, they told them that they needed an alternator. So they put an alternator in. The vehicle's owner took their vehicle, was driving it around, and found out the same things were happening again. So they took the car back to the shop, and they told them that maybe it was a bad part. Sometimes things like that happen. So they replaced the alternator again. And the vehicle owner took the car back, and the same things were happening again. The lights were dimming, the voltage needle on the instrument cluster was still surging, and the battery light was coming on. So they took the car to another shop. At this shop, they came up with the same thing. They said, let's replace the alternator. So the alternator was replaced for the third time, and the same things were happening. The lights were dimming, the voltage needle on the instrument cluster was surging, and the battery light was still coming on. So we got the car, and we found out everything that happened, how the battery was replaced and the alternator was replaced 3 times. So we could have went in and checked a whole lot of different things, you know what I mean, to see if the PCM was commanding the alternator to turn on, and we could have checked that the voltage was properly charging and the output from the voltage on the alternator. We could have checked a lot of different things, but we didn't want to do all that. We figured that these guys really knew how to replace the alternator. They did it 3 times, and we figured that the alternator was good. So we went in and we thought about the theory here of how this car has about 60-something thousand miles on it. It's about 8 years old, and there could be some carbon buildup on the throttle plates. That was our theory. So we tried to find a problem real fast, and what we did was we actually went and cleaned the throttle plates off. Reason being is that if you have carbon buildup on your throttle plates, what happens is your throttle plate starts to open up a little bit. And if your throttle plates is open up a little bit, the computer will think that somebody's foot is stepping on the gas. And what they'll do then is decrease the idle speed. So the engine will not be spinning at a fast enough revolution to charge the car, because the alternator will cut out at low RPMs and it will not charge the battery. So the computer, our theory was that the throttle plate had carbon buildup, the throttle plates were a little bit open, so the PCM was decreasing the idle, which in turn was telling the alternator to cut out and not charge the battery. So that was our theory. So we went in, we removed what we had to remove to get to the throttle plates, and we cleaned it up real good. Put everything back together. While we were cleaning the throttle plates, we disconnected the terminals off the negative and positive battery from the battery. And we also hooked a jumper cable up on the battery to discharge the capacitors in the PCM to clear the RAM in the computer. So once we did that, we cleaned the throttle plates off, we put everything back together, put the battery back together, and we started the car, and we monitored it for a while. We monitored the idle speed, we monitored the voltage, we checked everything out, and the idle stayed around 600 for a while. And before, the idle was dropping to around 520, 530, and the alternator needle on and the instrument cluster was surging. Here On our tester, the voltage was surging. On our scan tool, the RPMs was surging. And so we knew we had a problem then. But after we put everything back together, everything was fine. The voltage on the alternator stayed around 14 volts. The needle on the instrument cluster never moved, which was showing the voltage of the alternator. It never moved again, which would mean that the battery was now charging the car. And also the RPMs never dropped down again. So after we gathered all of our evidence from the vehicle's owner, and we went in and we used our theory, and then we tested our theory, and we applied our theory, and we seen that it all worked out. So sometimes things are always what they seem. It may seem that it was a bad alternator, where the alternator was replaced 3 times, so we knew the alternator was good. So what we had here was carbon buildup on the throttle plates that caused low RPMs and the alternator to not charge the battery and cause the customer of the vehicle owner to have that complaint. Sometimes you have to go in and you have to find out all the evidence and test it and see what happens sometimes. Thank you.